to the Copenhagen Circle, baby. We're about to have some really stimulating intellectual conversation. Phenomenal.
All right, welcome to the Copenhagen Circle. Today we're going to talk about happiness. And in the studio, we have Helena, Noémi, and Mathias. And today I'm going to question Helena about her master's thesis on happiness.
Great.
And
Nice to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. And let's get right into it. Helena, tell us, how can we be happy? Please enlighten us.
Right, starting out strong, I see. So one of the things I noticed when I started doing the research for this project is that there are a lot of tendency to do exactly that, to look for kind of a quick fix or a 5-step program, right? Is that I felt like everywhere I looked, there was some kind of guide to happiness. There was some kind of, I've got the secret. This is what you do. Mm-hmm. Start here, end there. And there were very few people kind of willing to say, what is it that we're trying to achieve? How do you actually define or describe or think about happiness? So when you're asking the question, the obvious answer would be, what do you mean by happiness?
Okay. Yeah. What do I mean by happiness? Yeah, that's a good question, right? Like, what are we talking about? It's not really necessarily anything measurable, right? What are we?
But it is measured all the time. That is one thing. You've probably all seen the whole Finland is the happiest country on the planet. It's been, I think, 6 years before we were for a while. So that's clearly someone is measuring it.
Yeah.
But what are they actually measuring is the question, I think.
Yeah. I guess in when they do the statistics about the countries, they're measuring stuff like BNP and then just general questions like, how happy are you from 1 to 10?
Absolutely.
That's it, right?
Yeah, because the BNP was, I think happiness measurements are absolutely the new BNP, interestingly enough. Like, it's kind of a selling point for the country. They're like, this is the happiest country, come experience it, kind of. It's prestigious to be happy. We have a very happiness-obsessed culture. And they really do want to measure it, and you're absolutely correct. I did a lot of research, actually, on these kinds of happiness surveys. And very often they ask just one question, which is sometimes referred to as the life satisfaction scale in psychology, which is, how happy are you on a scale, like how satisfied are you with your life is very common, on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they just ask a lot of people. And then the country with the most happy people are the ones where most people are satisfied.
But that must, I think from reflecting on that, like the biggest factor determining what people are going to answer is also whether or not you have a culture of satisfaction.
Yeah. Or do you complain a lot, or do you?
Yeah.
And it's all relative. We also know, like, are you satisfied because you are from a culture where you're not supposed to ask for too much? Mm-hmm. See maybe Finland and Denmark, where you're supposed to not strive for like excellence necessarily, but just to have a pretty nice life. Mm-hmm. I think that might be a factor in why they're right there on the top of it, but that's just speculation. But yeah, absolutely, it's cultural, I think. But it's not completely off, of course, because we can see the countries where there's a lot of inequality and a lot of people suffering, a lot of poverty. Mm-hmm. They tend to not be very happy. Right. So it's not. I'm not saying don't believe these at all, but I'm saying maybe take it with a grain of salt and try and understand. What are we talking about actually? What happiness are they describing, and is it one that I prescribe to? Mm-hmm. Do I just want to live my life so that I am satisfied with it? Like, I don't know. But it's one of two very common ideas in psychology, which is my other area of study. And it's the life satisfaction scale, which is either this one question, sometimes a few more.
What other questions are there usually in these surveys?
Then sometimes it's, I think it's actually most commonly the one here in life in general. But sometimes they ask, what about this area of your life? And are you doing, I think, hobbies that you do care about or stuff like that. But I found a few studies indicating that it doesn't really make a difference for the result, whether they ask the one question or multiple ones.
Yeah.
It's mainly the same results they get. People who have to figure out, am I at a 10 or am I at a 0? It really comes down to other things than number of questions mostly. There's a pretty famous researcher called Daniel Kahneman, who...
yes, I heard about that.
Yeah,
He's economist,
yeah, absolutely, and he's brilliant, and he has a great criticism of this idea that we are so good at knowing what we actually believe about things. He pretty expertly, I think, points out that when you sit down and you try to say, okay, how happy am I, how satisfied am I, actually is the word they use, it's often kind of, did you just find some money on the ground? Or were you offered some cake for lunch? Or did your bike get stolen? It's not really we're very bad as people. Human beings are pretty bad at evaluating just our whole life. Because they don't really say, it's right this moment, right? How satisfied am I right now? They're not saying the last 10 years. And in most conceptions of happiness, we do tend to think that it's a certain amount of time, right? It's not just yesterday and today I'm feeling pretty good. Or if my back hurts, am I then unhappy, Yeah. And I think this is particularly true in Danish, where we use, of course, the word lykke, which is better suited, I think, than happiness, because happiness is also kind of a mood, but we can talk more about that later. But Kahneman pretty clearly shows us that we are very easy to affect. That score of happiness, very easy to affect. He suggests another one, which is pretty similar to a kind of hedonistic measure that they do a lot in psychology. There are two general ideas in psychology about happiness, and the one is life satisfaction, and the other one is something more about how am I feeling the last few weeks. I have just forgotten the name of this survey, but it has 5 questions, so it ends with 5. It's an abbreviation, and it says kind of how was I feeling when I woke up? Was I feeling energized? Am I experiencing a lot of pleasure? Am I experiencing a lot of pain? Then it kind of goes okay, how much pleasure in your life are you kind of feeling? And that's the other idea. And Kahneman has a suggestion that's a little closer to that one, because he, of course, rejects the life satisfaction scale. And he says, how much of my time have I spent in activities that I would rather continue than stop? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of his measurement. And it's pretty simplistic again. A lot of modern psychology is based on what I think are pretty simple happiness views. And they're very often criticized. Kahneman and the whole general simple hedonistic psychology thing, which is just, am I feeling pleasure? It's a question. Am I feeling pleasure? Am I feeling pain? Am I feeling more pleasure than pain? That's criticized by another great philosopher, Martha Nussbaum. For this purpose, you just need to know that she's kind of famous for this. There's this whole idea of rights and political philosophy, and she's brilliant. Mm-hmm. But maybe for now, it's just important to say that she has a very great critique written down. I think it's called Something Happy Warrior, where she criticizes modern psychology for just using simple hedonism. Now, hedonism just means pleasure is king, kind of pleasure over. More pleasure than pain. Pleasure is the meaning of life. Mm-hmm. Mm. Pleasure is happiness in this case. Which is a little bit what Kahneman is suggesting, right? Is that, okay, we want to continue doing this activity. Is that maybe not because we're feeling some ounce of pleasure doing it? And the whole thing I'm trying to say here is just that there are a lot of indications, in my opinion, that modern psychology has a very simplified view of happiness. Mm-hmm. But it's not too far from how I think most of us would think of happiness. But in the philosophical tradition, we have lots of other kind of ideas and critiques and just a vast and beautiful and varied history that I would love to get into with you, because there is more to be said. We don't have to stop here, where happiness is either a kind of almost a get rich quick scheme, where it's like 5 steps, you're super happy tomorrow. And it doesn't have to be either just pleasure versus pain, and it does not have to be only how satisfied am I. Though I agree that those are part of it, they're related to the idea of happiness, I think we're kind of missing some other parts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you look to the rest of like kind of philosophy history to find where are we lacking.
I think psychology automatically becomes very materialistic because that's their essential method, right? It's looking at the actual material of the brain and everything.
That way of materialistic, yes.
Real because it's measurable and because we can interact with it somehow.
Yes, the whole idea of measuring happiness, that's definitely a goal for some of these researchers. And you will have to simplify. If you want to ask 20,000 people if they're happy, it cannot be a complicated process of like 50 questions and test, and it has to be simple. And what happens then? We simplify. We simplify it so much that I think it becomes kind of banal. And then we end with the question, why pursue happiness if happiness is literally just being satisfied or literally just feeling pleasure? What's the point, and how can we justify even looking for something like that? Yeah.
Can I ask a question, and all of us will answer, like, what is happiness to you? And then we can just go around and everyone can say. Helena, the guest?
Well, I'm afraid that we'll end a very long discussion here.
That's okay.
But I, in my thesis, I did set out to try and figure that out. Because I do think that there's like a personal take on it, and then there's a universal take. And I searched for, as close as you can get to a universal take, a framework that would make sense for a lot of people. And yeah, for me, that framework ended up being a 3-dimensional approach. I like to call it, and I call it that because I think happiness isn't just one thing, as I've kind of insinuated. It is more than that, and these dimensions kind of support and develop each other. And so I have chosen the 3 dimensions of pleasure, fulfillment, and maybe attitude or something you could say. And I'd love to get into that more with you, but that's kind of what I am using as my personal goal. So whenever I'm not thriving, I look to these 3 and I say, is there one of them that is lacking? And that's the kind of framework I use to figure out my life. And we can talk about that later. Let's go.
We'll definitely get into that.
Yeah.
Myself, I think, I don't know, I don't have like principles and like you, or for me it's very intuitive and like you can just tell immediately, right, whether or not you're happy. And very often you don't ask the question once you are happy, right? You don't look to how to become happy because you are happy. And I think for me the way I would describe it through my own experience of reality is just feeling that I'm in the right place, doing what I should be doing, sort of like it gets very easily like spiritual and so on, right? But it's about feeling like the world is a unity and I'm a little piece of it, and I fit into that puzzle, and the piece of me. I'm not somehow just put here on this earth, abandoned to myself, and it's all just random molecular spaghetti, and there's just that I really feel like that and that's a certain type of feeling, I think, for me, and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not, and sometimes I can see it and sometimes not. and yeah, there's certain factors that bring me closer to that, and certain ones that don't, and then I when I'm aware of it, I try to move towards the ones that bring me to that state of mind. Yeah. How about you, Noémi?
Ooh. Well, I did not overthink this because I think I'd rather have a boring take on happiness, because I look at happiness as just an emotion, a feeling. So I try to feel happy every day a little bit. I try to eat sweet and sour and salty and such. So to me, happiness is just an emotion and not too big. Like I'm not trying to chase it and feel happy all the time. So yes, but you two have a really nice thought of that, and you also, Helena, you have a theory on that. So
Yes, please get into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it might make sense potentially to start with a bit of historical context.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of historical kind of reading. I don't know what to say. Like it's all the most important theories of happiness throughout philosophy or idea history. I accidentally kind of read most of it. I remember in the beginning my supervisor was like, just choose a few. And then slowly at the end she said, like, well, you don't really have to justify who you chose anymore because you've just chosen everyone who seems kind of vaguely relevant. Of course, happiness is something that's been discussed by many philosophers, many different schools of thought. And usually whenever you talk about this, if you don't mind getting back in, like all the way back, we're going to start where we always start whenever there's a philosophy kind of history thing, with Aristotle and the Greeks. And we're going to start with the concept of eudaimonia. I think that's how you say it usually in English. I don't do a lot of translating to the... Are you more familiar?
Eudaimonia, yeah, that's... what is the exact translation? I'm not sure, but it's the happy life, right?
Yeah, so it means like a good demon is with you. And demons back then were not as this kind of Christian idea we have now of them being these evil monsters.
It was a voice talking to your head, right?
Yeah, like I think of it more as like a spirit or something in between the gods and the people.
Wait, is it not your inner voice?
Your conscience.
Yeah, some people could say that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But here, when you say eudaimonia, I don't know. Please don't hate me for mispronouncing. But it means like the good spirits are kind of with you. And that probably comes from an even earlier conception, like before Aristotle came by and said, hey guys, this is what it's all about. The common Greek, if we can even call them that at that time, I probably can, but they were just thinking of happiness as luck, basically. That's everything I can find about this indicates that happiness was just luck. So a happy life would be something you said when you are done living and you've been very lucky, things have gone well for you, you have been happy. That's a happy life. So you couldn't claim that you were happy before you died because everything could be kind of taken away from you in the last moments. And Aristotle kind of comes in and says, well, maybe we have a little bit more to do with it than that. So he kind of shifts the perception a little bit. He describes this eudaimonia as kind of, it's like a thriving. So it's deep in Aristotelian thought, and I'm not an expert of Aristotle, so like let's take everything I say with a grain of salt. But as I understand it, we all have this, you could say maybe purpose or thing we're going to grow into. Any kind of item will go somewhere. It wants to go somewhere. As people, we want to become the most human in some sense. And that's kind of what this term describes. So becoming happy to Aristotle is not becoming happy as in like this modern time, especially not like what you just said, Noémi. It's not a mood at all. It is a way of living. And it's a life, and it's ending up somewhere. Mm-hmm. It means thriving as a person. And so it encompasses just way more than psychological happiness, which is this kind of internal happiness, this mood or these thoughts and this attitude. It also has things like luck, morality, like living ethically is part of it. Then you're kind of living up to your purpose as a person.
I was thinking with Aristotle, it's also the process of becoming whole.
Yeah,
in a sense,
absolutely.
like virtue ethics and
Yes.
his idea of virtue is to, like, there's all these different aspects of your personality and you have all these different traits, and it's about aligning these traits into like some sort of complete being that strives towards the good in some sense. And
Yeah, well put.
And I don't know, the way I make sense of it is I equate it to something else, and I equate it to like what I know, and I know like Jungian psychoanalysis, which is also about integrating these different aspects of yourself, and I think that's definitely also a theory of maybe not the jittery materialistic happiness, but some other type of happiness.
Sure, but Aristotle definitely included things that we would think are not that relevant, like kind of being a successful member of society, and like doing well and having good children. I think it literally says, which is very interesting.
Okay.
So it's this kind of, what does it mean being successful in these like old Greek terms? And what comes just like pretty soon after is two schools of thought that are very often mentioned, at least one of them, which is Stoicism, that I know you, Mathias, know a lot about, and Epicureanism, which is often neglected. But these were two schools that were rivals, and both kind of came forth from this idea of eudaimonia. And they have a lot in common, but they also were clearly rivals, and it's very different, two different conceptions of happiness. While Stoicism is pretty popular these years, it's similar to Epicureanism in that it's about like unhappiness stems from not being kind of where you want, not getting what you want, and happiness is getting what you want. In the simplest of terms, I think to the Stoic, events are not really good or bad. It's only your attitudes. And you're supposed to kind of focus in on, like, I guess something like a Stoic recipe for happiness, for eudaimonia, would be living in this way, like where you're following the Stoic values and you're accepting what you cannot change and kind of changing your attitudes towards things. And therefore you're not feeling unhappy, you're not feeling fear or anxiety. But it's important to note that with the Stoics, pain does not result in unhappiness. You can be in pain and happy because events are not good or bad. So if you're feeling fine about the pain, you're doing good. It's a little similar to actually the worldview you just presented before, Mathias. It's like this, like where am I in the great scheme of things? And I know I'm doing my part. What's often left out in the modern discussion of Stoicism is that it's a very specific, I would say, spiritual system.
Yes.
It's not just kind of this hot modern tech bro. Sorry about take. That's not what I'm accusing you of having, but it's one I see very often. This idea of it's like a management strategy where you have no feelings and it's very atheist. A lot of researchers believe that the Stoics had a god and they had maybe a monotheistic system.
When I researched it, I realized it's a complete system. Actually, they have deep epistemology and they have
absolutely
ethics, and they have all these different aspects that a philosophy needs to be complete. And I realized what ties it all together is the belief in a good God.
Yes, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, and that's what. Whenever you have this modern atheist take, and full disclosure, I'm not religious, but still like this modern take where it's just like, oh, we can just believe that everything's gonna work out and don't fret. Yeah, just accept everything. It works. It's less convincing if there's not a supreme intelligent being controlling every single thing. The Stoics really seem to believe.
Yes.
And we have, of course, only fragments of a lot of these very old philosophies and schools of thought. But it seems that they really believed that the world was very ordered and everything would work out. And therefore, you could kind of relax. It's very similar to a lot of modern Christians as well. Of this, like, oh, you can relax and trust because God will have you. Like, he will make sure that everything works out. So if you're not super into that, if that's not your thing, then just taking Stoicism out of its context is maybe at best a little problematic.
Yeah.
You'll need to justify it somehow.
That's why the 10-minute YouTube videos on Stoicism doesn't work.
Yeah, like 10 great quotes from like Zenon. It's, of course, I do not want to, if you're one of the kind of people who does this, I don't want to take any source of inspiration away from you. Like, if you just really find lots of common, lots of will to live and great systems in Stoicism, please keep using them. But it is important to note that it was actually rooted in a belief that everything happened kind of for a reason.
That was their response to academic skepticism. I think.
Because they had to respond constantly to criticism. These two schools, Epicureanism and Stoicism, and a few others as well, Cynicism and so on, they were kind of competing for the attention of the average citizen and like, how do you succeed in life? Here's our takes. So that's why I think they had this whole like background material and they were ready for all sorts of criticism, and it's very interesting today. Because of course there were a lot of common criticisms even today with Stoicism. One of them is the religious nature of it. What if we don't believe that everything is there? Because then the kind of idea that pain doesn't result in unhappiness gets harder to justify. Like, if you're proper, like kind of hardcore Stoic, you would say that something like your children burning down in a house, like fire, burning, like dying, I mean, in a house fire, you shouldn't really worry too much. Like, don't really feel bad about that. It's just your attitude that sucks. It isn't really bad. But that's because it's part of a whole. It's part of a plan. Like, it had to happen. So being happy as a Stoic is kind of just playing your part in the scheme of life, kind of just being part of a whole and realizing that, yes, I am important just as everyone else is, but I also in a way am not. Because there's a supreme intelligence doing everything for me, and everything is working out as it's supposed to be. There's logic to the world.
That's resembles as a true Christian belief, right? Like,
yeah, Christians are definitely inspired as well.
There is an idea that like they sort of translate throughout history.
Yes.
Stuff is inspired.
I mean, my grandma was really Christian, and she just said that that's God's will when her son died, and that's really.
It's pretty Stoic of her, actually. You could say that at least, yeah.
Can I ask you,
Yes.
Helena, so what would the Epicureans say?
Yeah, great question. Because so they were very much at the same time. We're talking like this is around 300 BC. That Epicurus and Zenon, I think, in English.
The founder.
Yeah, of Stoicism.
So they're living like next to each other?
They're very they're at the same time. And that's super interesting. Like, it's not exactly on the year, but they're very close. Very close. And it's definitely simultaneous movements. So Epicureanism is often misunderstood today as a kind of pure hedonism. Hedonism, of course, being today kind of a bad no word of like prioritizing just debauchery and like just just pleasure over morals and kind of. And it's important to note that while Epicurus was definitely a hedonist, he's a hedonist in a way that most people don't really think of the word. He believed, it seems from written sources, that pleasure was the most important thing in the world. That by definition almost makes him a hedonist. But what he was teaching his disciples wasn't like how to pursue pleasure over everything else, so much as if it was how to avoid pain. And it was happiness to Epicurus was the absence of mental and physical pain. Mental pain being things like fear. So they also developed a system of thought, like a science at the time, you could say, a worldview. That's where we have the atomic theory in the philosophical sense, which is everything can be made into very teeny tiny parts, and they just kind of all work together. either like clockwork or just randomly, or I don't actually remember which one of them they believed. But basically, there is no God, so you shouldn't fear it. Or if there is a God, if there are multiple gods, as was often believed back then, they're not able to hurt you. So don't fear the wrath of the gods. That was obviously a very common problem back then. That was leading to a lot of pain and fear. So that's what they addressed. And also they said, do not fear death, because death is nothing. You just cease to exist.
Where I am, death is not.
Yeah, exactly. So both Epicureanism and Stoicism is actually about, in the simplest sense, getting, like, happiness is getting what you want. But both of them kind of focus on just lowering the want, lowering the desires, instead of just getting more stuff. So while we might think of the negative connotation of a hedonist as someone who just tries to get everything they could possibly ever want or desire, it's more like realizing, Epicurus says, that you have some needs that are natural, you have some needs that are necessary, and then you have a lot of needs that aren't. So Epicurus would probably suggest, even today, a life of having some friends, but not being too involved with politics, actually, and that's apparently stressful. Eating eating food to nourish yourself, drinking water, but that's kind of it. Like, it's, when we think hedonism, we think wine and parties and sex and,
Drinking wine, but he said only one glass.
Yeah, is that true?
Yeah.
How
That
big
sounds
is
like-
that glass?
That's the question. but he was like, yeah, you want to maximize it. You don't want the hangover, right?
Yes.
That's the idea, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah.
Exactly. So these were two earlier conceptions of this, but of course after Aristotle.
Can I want to tie these two philosophies to like a practical example that I really like.
Yes.
And it's this idea of what would the Stoics and the Epicureans do in case it started raining. And like the Stoic would probably just stay in the rain. He says, don't let the rain bother you. Like it's just
There's nothing bad about the rain. It's just your
bad.
attitude, your
It's just
story about
exactly. And the Epicurean would say, just go inside.
it. Yeah, just pull out your umbrella. Come on. Yeah, because they might say that's a natural need to not be wet and cold and miserable.
Yes.
So it's natural to just pull up your umbrella.
Mhm.
That's what they would probably say.
You just converted me from Stoic to Epicureanism. I want more
The
now.
Epicureans got
Yeah.
something for sure.
I think
Yeah.
more people would actually be into this than who like a lot of the people who are against Stoicism right now don't even know they're against it, but actually they would benefit from learning a bit about Epicurus and his teaching.
Okay,
I think because
that's the new era.
I think we should learn a little bit more about that in general, most of us, because I think most of us agree, and it is something that then inspired the next big thing in happiness philosophy, which is utilitarianism, which I assume you might have heard of. It's the idea that the point, it is the greatest good for the greatest number, is what you often say, is the kind of quote. That is what we ethically should strive for. So it's a theory of ethics, and it has in it a very clear happiness conception, happiness idea, definition. So greatest good for the greatest number kind of insinuates that, I don't know how to say this, it's a hedonist idea again. It's pleasure. Yeah, it's maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain for as many people as possible. That's the good. So this is the definition of the good and not necessarily of happiness, but they're saying happiness is good. If you understand happiness to be lots of pleasure, not so much pain. And this was, of course, with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, and it's still this idea that pleasure is king, kind of. That's the hedonist part of it. But then there's a little bit of variety. Bentham was very simple-minded. He put up actual equations sometimes of to figure out what is good, how much units of pleasure versus units of pain. Yeah, it seems a little bit maybe today. And even then, he was criticized wildly for this, I think. And it has been often misunderstood, like all of hedonism, but it's a pretty useful and commonly used moral codex or ethical theory. While John Stuart Mill talked about something called qualitative pleasure. So it's not just quantitative, it's not just units of pleasure. He said some pleasures are higher than other pleasures. Like the pleasure of going to an opera versus hearing someone hum a tune. Something like that. And it gets pretty elitist very fast, these things. He has some ideas of how to figure out which one is the highest pleasure. But I'm not a big fan of any of those, so I think he said once he has that famous quote, isn't that John Stuart Mill, about rather be a dissatisfied Socrates than a happy pig, I think is the... Yeah, because there's higher pleasures in being Socrates. But as I said, it gets a little bit elitist very fast. And it is not as objective, I think, as he would like it to be. But he does suggest having a person who's tried both, say which one is better. But I don't know. I remain fairly unconvinced that this is the solution.
While we're moving up throughout history in terms of happiness philosophies, you talking about equations in happiness. I want to mention Friedrich Nietzsche's idea about, I'm not even sure if he advocated for this particularly, but what I get from it is a certain type of equation, which is sort of pain equals pleasure. And when the amount of either one increases or decreases, it translates sort of equally in the grand scheme of things. And I don't know. I think that's a interesting idea, and I do find it to be very true, looking at the experiences of my own life. At least when I do hard things, like I do find that to get a great deal of pleasure in return, and I don't know, I go to the gym and my muscles hurt, but then I feel great pleasure, and I do it's in all parts of life. I give away and I feel good.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's about a little loss and then a little gain.
It makes sense, but I think the utilitarian response to that would just be, well, it is pain and pleasure over time, which means that there's less pain involved and there's pleasure coming out of it. So you would, for example, not suggest an actual utilitarian would not say, hey, let's go get super drunk every single day, develop an alcohol addiction, because the bad parts of that, the side effects from that, vastly outweigh the fun you're having. And the same thing with the gym. Like the same, exactly. And that's all hedonism, kind of. The idea is not that you just do everything that seems a little pleasurable. There is definitely thought to be had. So even though I personally think utilitarianism is not the framework, like it doesn't encompass everything I want from a happiness framework, it absolutely has a lot of good things in it. And people tend to simplify it and criticize it sometimes where it's not that warranted, I think, because it's, if you go to the gym and you then are not in pain after, and your shoulders don't hurt because you've stretched them out, that's going to be pleasure enough to kind of offset the bad effects. That's like if you go and cheat on your spouse because you want a little, 5 minutes of fun, the repercussions of that kind of outweigh the fun. So that's the utilitarian response. But it's interesting what Nietzsche says as well. It's not going to work out.
But yeah, I'm trying to make a different point, I think. For me, personally, the problem isn't what to do, because I know perfectly what to do. It's the problem of getting myself to actually do it. And then the question becomes, why wouldn't I do it? Mm-hmm. And then we're a layer deeper. And I think for me, what makes me not do it is a bad conscience, a bad self-image, not thinking that I'm actually worth taking care of, that I'm worth making a proper meal tonight, and worth taking to the gym, and worth going to bed early, and worth feeling like I'm a good person, that I can somehow contribute to other people's lives. So I reach out to them and talk to them and reach out to my family. And like, I know all these things that make me happy.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like I'm a shit person, and I feel like I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
So for me, I call it Christian attitude is of the bad conscience. Am I guilty? Am I condemned? And the words of Jesus is all about forgiveness and not living in this state of guilt, this state of I have sinned, right? It's
super interesting, because I would often say like it's the opposite. That what you're describing to me sounds very Christian. This like I need to earn it, especially in Protestantism. Like I need to earn happiness. So we didn't discuss a lot about the Christian kind of conception of happiness, but this has especially Protestantism, and because we're all in like all of this very Western thought, but in where we're here, like in Denmark and Europe in general, Northern Europe in particular, we are very used to this Protestant thought of having to work for something to gain something in return. And heaven kind of became this idea, like salvation is the happiness. So if you work very hard, happiness is not in this life, it's for the next one. And some people would even argue that the many modern ideas of happiness, while we have taken heaven down to earth, and now we're supposed to be happy in this life, a lot of people still carry that same attitude. It's something I need to work towards. It's something I need to earn. I need to earn being happy. I can't just be happy. I need to first work very hard. And then we do all sorts of things to keep ourselves from that goal because we don't feel worthy yet. So we're getting into a little bit of the field of psychology again. This like, why am I not letting myself be happy? And I'm very like interested in this part of it as well. It's not strictly about the definition of happiness or like if there even is such a thing. It's not the conception of happiness. It's more, if I know that I'm supposed to be doing all these things, why am I not doing them? And it's often, I think, rooted in actually a Christian thought of, I have not earned it yet. I'm a sinful person. And I think it's just splendid if you can find in Christianity a kind of place of forgiveness for that and realize, hey, I am worthy because I'm loved by God and so on. I think that's just splendid. Personally, I can't. And I feel a lot of shame is prevalent in Christian communities and a lot of ideas of having to work hard, even if it's only culturally Christian. And I don't personally believe that happiness is even something to be kind of achieved. I don't think it's on your list of achievements. I think that's often how it's presented, and in part because of Christianity, that it's you work very hard and then you're happy, right? Then you're there. But just like heaven is very seldomly described by Christians, so is happiness very seldomly described by anyone. Where is the end goal? What does it mean? How do I know I've worked hard enough? And I think the answer is you often don't know. And that's how we kind of get in all this trouble anyways, in my opinion. So some people believe you shouldn't chase happiness because if you're like, you will never find it. It's like the kind of don't look for love. Don't go looking for happiness because there will be no point where this is it. And therefore it doesn't matter. Happiness isn't important. I don't subscribe to that idea. So if there are things that you are not doing, even for your well-being, I think that's definitely part of happiness, your well-being. There should be, in my mind, a distinction between the different forms of happiness. We've discussed a great deal now, and the Danish philosopher Søren Harnaut Clausen has a great distinction of some of these. You should go read his book on happiness, it's very good. But for example, the distinction between what's a good life and what's kind of just well-being, and that well-being is part of a good life. Like, how are you feeling? Are you doing good? Are you sleeping enough? Kind of. And happiness is maybe even a smaller part of that, potentially. I don't remember exactly the distinctions he makes, but it's important to know that there are different things we're talking about. So when we're discussing happiness and discussing, is this something, how do I make myself do it? Or how do I get there? think about what do you mean by it. That's kind of the conclusion from all this historical discussion. It's how, like, be critical of where you're supposed to be. There are different conceptions. If you believe in happiness as kind of a psychological state, which is what I would advocate for, that actually means you're taking a step away from Aristotle and eudaimonia, and instead you're saying, okay, all this outside stuff that I cannot control, like are my children good? Or what is my legacy? What is my impact? I don't think you should include them in happiness. I think you should include, yeah, sure, maybe your well-being, but only in the form of what it feels like psychologically. And when I say psychological happiness, I do not mean the two conceptions we just talked about earlier, though they are similar. It's this idea that it's not about what's happening outside of your mind. It's all in your mind. I believe happiness is only in your mind. And of course, when I say I believe, it's not that I think happiness is a thing out there that can be defined. It's what I think is most useful to think. I think it's a more useful term and concept when it's in your mind. And I don't think that makes it an unworthy goal to pursue. I think it's very worthy. I think it's probably, to me, the most worthy goal. But I need the quick little comment there that I think it's not just my happiness that matters, but everyone's. That's a very utilitarian thought, that everyone's happiness matters equally. And though I have I would say, slightly more complicated concept of happiness than pure utilitarianism, I still believe that holds. I think if you devote your life to the search for happiness for you and for others, that is the only thing almost that can be justified. Some people think that kind of search is unethical, and that's why they might be holding themselves back. That could be one reason, right? It's unethical for me to be happy. I think it's the opposite. I think it's the only ethical that we can all kind of agree on, and that's everyone. And usually you don't make anyone happier by being miserable yourself, because your happiness matters as much as everyone else, right? Which means if you're just dedicating your life to helping others, you're actually misunderstanding. You're not promoting happiness because you're neglecting you. And as the Stoics would say, you are the one that you have the most influence over. So that's where to start. You always start closest to yourself. And therefore, I believe that happiness is a very worthy goal of existence. And that's why we need to talk about it. What is it? What's going on? And that's why we are interested in looking at all these different conceptions. But I think in total, it's an important part of the search for it, to figure out what am I really looking for. Because all these quick guides of like, that we've all heard all these advice, like get enough sleep and see your friends and all those things. Sure, to me they're part of well-being. They're part of pleasure, actually, like this utilitarian. If you don't sleep, if you don't have good self-esteem, if you don't make good meals for yourself, you're going to suffer. And suffering is a form of unhappiness. I don't think it's the only one. I don't think that if you didn't sleep enough, then you are deeply unhappy all the time. But it does affect it. Yes. I do not agree with the Stoics, for example. I don't think that you can be popularly said like happy doing torture. I don't think that's a thing. I think you can be somewhat happy doing torture. Like if you're,
this is fine.
Yeah, like you could be like, I accept this, and I don't put any value to it, and therefore it's not so bad. But you're not happy. Yeah. I think it dilutes the concept. So I tried to kind of put together all these different subjects, not just all of them, all these different conceptions, but kind of figure out what do I really think matters. I have a whole, like, this makes it kind of sound like I was just sitting on my couch thinking about it, like, that's kind of nice, which I suppose is true to some extent, but like I based it kind of on an analysis of all of this, and I came up with a framework of 3 parts that are deeply rooted in the history. And you told me you'd like to hear a bit more about those, so maybe yes, maybe we have a segue of that into that now. I am not completely certain of the actual like particular words we're going to use, but hopefully these parts will be pretty familiar to you. So in the three-dimensional approach I kind of developed, I started out with what seemed to be the simplest one, which is pleasure, the hedonistic kind of dimension. I don't think any conception of happiness is complete without it. Because I think someone who is in deep, deep pain, psychological or physical pain, or both at the same time, are just never going to be happy. Like, we don't use the word, like, it would be meaningless, I think, to describe someone as happy if they're just in constant pain. I disagree here with a lot of critics of utilitarianism and hedonism in general, but I have not been convinced about the arguments, except for the one that it's too simple. It's not enough. If I constantly experience pleasure and I never experience any pain, I guess you could say that I'm happy, but I just have this intuition that there's more to it. Because why would I need to pursue this? If happiness is literally just feeling pleasure and no pain, what is the point of it? What is the inherent value? There is inherent value in it, I would say. We living beings with emotions and feelings, and like, we are not supposed to feel pain. Like, we don't like it intuitively. We shy away from pain. I think Bentham said this too. We shy away from pain. We go towards pleasure. That makes it somewhat meaningful. Mm-hmm. But I was convinced by a lot of these other conceptions that there is more to it as well. So I suggested another dimension, which you could call something like fulfillment or meaning. Now, some people insist that happiness isn't the goal because it doesn't have this. I would instead say that any conception of happiness that doesn't have anything like this is just incomplete. Meaning is absolutely related to happiness. It's actually part of it, I would say. And meaning can be anything. It doesn't need to be the meaning of life in this religious sense. It can be the meaning of what are you doing with your life and why. I will do a kind of quick introduction, then we can go further with all of them to make sure that you kind of understand what I'm getting at, because it's a little bit different way of seeing it. The third one you could call something like attitude. It's about acceptance, gratitude, feeling of awe. It's your whole, today maybe you'd say mindset a little bit. How do you approach life? And it could be a little similar to the life satisfaction scale we talked about earlier, like, am I satisfied with everything? But I think that's the simplest possible interpretation of this dimension. Mm-hmm. So I want you to kind of imagine a pyramid. So there's a triangle at the bottom, and then it kind of goes up and ends in this like little pointy top. That's how I visualize it, and that's why I called it three-dimensional. Every plane on this pyramid is another dimension. And the reason I have kind of imagined it like this, and I haven't just said, oh, here are the 3 parts, 3 steps, do this, then this, is because I don't think they are constituting parts of it per se. Well, they are, but it's very important that you view them as kind of a spectrum. So if you're like the happiest person is up at the tip, which means all 3 of them are kind of checked in a way, but I really don't want to use that language, but it's kind of how much of them do you have? And it's not just quantifiable in that simple sense. So I'll give you an example. The easiest example is with pleasure or the hedonistic element. So I don't believe in qualitative differences per se, but it is relevant to think of it maybe, that some pleasures are higher than others and that they give more pleasure. A simple pleasure could be something like having a beer in the sunshine. To most people, that's pretty simple to do. Mm-hmm. It's not like a deep-rooted pleasure. Would you say that you're happy with the beer? Maybe. So, you're not unhappy probably, but you're like, that's it's very Danish take, this. But it's a simple pleasure, though. It's not the meaning kind of your life. If you are trying to say that you should pursue happiness, and happiness is a beer and sunshine, I would agree with you somewhat, but
there's going to be some men nodding along here.
Yeah, it's I would agree somewhat, but maybe there are higher pleasures. a good example is being truly and deeply loved by someone. Romantic love, family love, friendship, like this, like really truly seen and appreciated and loved by someone can be a pleasure, has a pleasure component that I would say is it's just more than a beer. I love beer as much as the next gal, but like it's it's something else, right? So the other concepts kind of work the same way. So you're moving up the pyramid. And like I'll just give an example for all three of them. I think that might be useful actually. So when I talk about fulfillment, the second dimension, I talk about doing things that matter to you. It means that you have actually made a decision about them in some way, or that they have just been kind of given to you by society. This is important. So it's what you consider important. So this is a very subjective idea, and all of them are. That's very important to kind of underscore. Fulfillment is about what do you think is important. So let's say you think it's important to have a good education. If you've just been taught that by your parents, you're still going to feel fulfillment when you succeed. But if you have really thought about it, you've really like deeply internalized this, you've been critical, and you're doing this for you because you personally find fulfillment, then you're going to feel even more fulfillment. And it's the same with the pleasure principle. If you don't like beer, you're not going to feel a lot of pleasure in the sun with one, right? So fulfillment is about what do I want to do? And on the very basic scale, it's something like, oh, I want to go take a drama class. And then you go do that, and it's just one class, and you have a good time. And it was meaningful. But was it meaningful as in, oh, I want to save all starving children in this city? Probably not to most people. Mm-hmm. So getting kind of your life goal that you really, really deeply thought about, that you really believe is deeply meaningful, then doing it, that's the top of the pyramid again. Then we're really getting into something that's beautiful kind of and fulfilling. And the reason it's a pyramid is because, as you might have already thought about, like when you really feel fulfilled, you often feel pleasure. So they kind of go together. Let's say an example like birthing your first child with the love of your life, having wanted to be a parent for 15 years and not succeeding. And we can put a whole backstory. And this is like the most important thing you think you could be doing with your life. Mm-hmm. If that's the person we're describing here, when they then succeed in that goal, they're holding their firstborn in their arms. They're probably feeling a lot of pleasure. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pleasure involved. Probably a higher pleasure than the beer again.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. I don't know, some people really like beer. But but I just mean like then you're probably feeling that. And that's on purpose. That's part of the design of this model, that you're feeling usually all of them at the same time. But there's also a lot of pain in giving birth and all this. And the pain can sometimes, which is we're getting a little close to what you said about Nietzsche, the pain can actually sometimes make something feel more fulfilling. A lot of studies on parents have shown that parents are pretty miserable overall, that childless women who aren't married are actually really happy in general. Mm-hmm. And while I don't doubt that that's true, I'm not super pro children or anything. I'm not going to say that that's like the way to happiness. But I do think that we're missing something very important from the happiness of parents that aren't being described when we just look at like pain versus pleasure or life evaluations, which is, was this fulfilling? Is it fulfilling to kind of have a child? And for some people, it is deeply, deeply fulfilling. So if you have a child that you didn't want to have from an accident or even, God forbid, some kind of sexual crime, I'm gonna say that it's unlikely that you'll feel the same amount of fulfillment. Of course, everyone's different and there's different situations, but it's not just that there are these objectives that you can kind of try and hit. It has to be important to you. Mm-hmm. So the third thing, attitude, third dimension, is how are you generally feeling about life? And that's everything from like, can you accept where you are right now? Can you accept yourself as well? This is very like the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard would say, that you have to kind of accept yourself and where you're at, all your bad sides, your good sides, everything. I think that's the minimum. That's one side of the spectrum. That's like what you need to be happy. If you're having a life, if you're living a life that's borderline unacceptable, there can be lots of reasons it's unacceptable. Lots of people in like certain countries and certain poverty-stricken areas, and they are just living under unacceptable life circumstances. They are not able to feed their children. They're not able to feed themselves. They're feeling so much pain, which is of course part of the pleasure component, but they can't accept that pain. While Stoicism might say, yeah, you need to accept things. It's not always that easy, but this dimension is actually inspired by Stoicism, as you can maybe hear. I think if you cannot accept where you are at, and you cannot accept yourself, you think you're terrible. Like if you think you're a monster that doesn't deserve love, you're not going to be happy. I don't think it's meaningful to call you happy either. So that's kind of the minimum. Then we move on to, like, after you've accepted yourself, even going higher on the spectrum would be something like being grateful for your life and yourself, appreciating what you have. And all the way to the top, like the very tip of the pyramid, I think we have awe, this sense of wonder, of feeling connected, of feeling part of everything, of appreciating every single little moment. It's very common in a lot of Eastern spiritual traditions to talk about this. And of course, it's also a little Stoic. I'm very inspired by those. We didn't have time to kind of cover them today, I think, but it's...
We'll do another one.
Yeah, just keep going. No, but this, am I kind of in the moment? Am I living right now? The pleasure of being in the moment is not just a kind of hedonist pleasure. It's a different sensation. So all these three dimensions are obviously like different. They are impossible to just kind of understand on one scale, I believe. That's my claim, that they're different in nature. The attitude is something you carry around with you at all times. It's kind of, it doesn't work in time in a way. While fulfillment is very much something that happens when you make, like you have a goal and you start working towards it, you're already feeling fulfillment. You're like, oh yes, I will get that beer in the sun, right? Then you have the beer and you're like, this is great. And then after you've had the beer, you're like, wow, I had a beer and it was brilliant, right? So something that really scores high on the fulfillment scale will have been pleasurable all the way through, even if there was pain. There is a certain pleasure in working towards your goals. So that works very much in time, and that kind of that's what people kind of criticize very often, is this, happiness is just chasing one goal and the next goal, and you never end anywhere. That's one aspect of it. But attitude, this idea of accepting and being grateful and and being in the moment, that's constant, basically constant. That's who you are. That's sometimes what I think the old ancient Greeks would say about all this philosophical training you should go through with the Stoics and the Epicureans and even Aristotelian thought. You were undergoing lots of philosophical kind of training. And one of the things could be to become a kind of person who has this attitude about life and about yourself. Pleasure is very moment to moment, right? You're either in pleasure or in pain. It changes very fast. So here we have three dimensions that are not working in the same kind of context in a way. There's like happiness right now, there's happiness in a longer scale kind of, and there's happiness in a non-time based scale. So if you want to use this framework for, let's try and get a little practical, that's usually an Achilles heel of these. If you want to ask yourself right now, am I happy? Based on this framework, you would say things like, am I feeling pleasure? Am I in general, like maybe let's say, take it last week. Use that psychology scale of like, have I been waking up feeling refreshed? And whatever you want to do. Am I feeling pleasure? And am I in pain in any kind of way? Then you move on to say, am I doing things that matter to me? And am I succeeding in them? Because it matters to just try, but you're going to feel even more fulfillment if it works out. So do I even know what I want? And am I doing it? And is it something I want or something society told me to want? And does it feel good when I've done it? And the last one, attitude. How are my views about life? Am I feeling connected to the moment? Am I grateful for what I have? Am I grateful for who I am? Those are the questions I ask myself when I'm trying to determine my level of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found it pretty helpful, actually, usually, as a kind of framework to, then use and look at. I know that I have a tendency to focus too much on fulfillment and not enough on pleasure. Mm-hmm. I have a tendency to kind of overvalue getting projects done, and that means that I often feel very fulfilled. I feel like I'm really doing something that matters to me, but I'm depleted and I'm stressed out. And
me too.
Yeah, so that can be a common way. And if you're someone who focuses a lot on like attitude, so it's like you're really good at staying in the moment and so on, but you're never actually doing anything that's meaningful to you, you're lacking something too. Or if you're just super focused on pleasure, so like it's constant, like everything's so pleasurable and nothing's pain, but again, you might not be doing anything meaningful, and you might not actually be in the moment when you're feeling that pleasure. Mm-hmm. So again, tip of the pyramid, all three things at once. So you could be there with this child made from love and struggle, and you're just like, oh, I'm so happy. It's very hard to imagine that you're just not in the moment, right? Like, and that you're just somewhere else. You're just thinking about the laundry while you're like in the hospital. I think that's unlikely, because then you're not feeling this much pleasure. When we're really, really feeling high amounts of pleasure, we are in the moment. Like, think about the last time you were just like, this is so pleasurable, I can barely like contain it. You were probably right there. And you are probably also feeling pretty grateful about it. Like, you're probably feeling like, oh, this is amazing. I'm so happy I have it. And fulfilled. So my point is not that we need to cross off all these three. You start with pleasure, then you move on to fulfillment. It's that they work together to become dimensions of the same thing, which is happiness. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have all three, it's going to be very difficult not like to have a very high on two of them and not on one of them. But the point is that you have to focus on all of them, or it will kind of take care of itself, because this is not a framework designed to make you happy. I set out to figure out what even is happy, because we have, as we discussed, lots of guides how to be happy. But if we don't know what that looks like, how do we know we are? And you could be intuitive and say, I just feel it, or like I am happy, like mood. But I found that when I am happy, I am all these three things. Yes, I feel those three things. They felt intuitive to me. Mm-hmm. When I wrote them down, I was like, yes. And once in a while, it helped me to see I am very happy in some ways right now, but something's lacking. And it's always, to me, one of the dimensions. It's always one of them where I'm like, I'm not doing this enough.
Can you summarize again the dimensions?
Yes.
Attitude, hedonistic, and meaning, right?
So right here, I've written it down as pleasure, fulfillment, and attitude. So pleasure is like, am I feeling pleasure? It's hedonism, right? Pretty simple hedonism. Fulfillment, am I doing meaningful things? And attitude, am I accepting? Am I grateful? Am I in awe? Am I in the moment? I also want to add that meaning, the meaning dimension, is often very social, because a lot of people are criticizing different conceptions of happiness for being too egotistical, kind of too based on one person. Or the social aspect to me is in the meaningful aspect. So what we want to do that's really deeply fulfilling almost always involves other people. It's very rare that they're just not related at all. There will be things in your life that are kind of solitary, but in general, we want to make a difference. And that's also where the happiness of others come in, because we're like, if I'm contributing to other people's happiness in this framework, like these three dimensions, I'm feeling fulfilled. So it kind of supports itself in a way. And as I said earlier, happiness is at least the goal of my life. That's what I'm kind of aiming for, but it's not just mine. It's everyone's. Mm-hmm. And that in turn makes me happier. So it's a very nice system, actually.
I have to also say, not just so you say it, like, I really like your three-dimensional system, and I think it incorporates vast amounts of philosophical history and and you incorporate it into one sort of philosophy, and with this triangle, you make it make sense, and I think anyone who's listening can actually use it and analyze their own current situation, and maybe it's going to bring them some sort of, they're going to think, okay, this aspect is what I need to work on. Right.
Yeah, it's my hope at least that people will start, some people might hear some of this and think, okay, what am I actually, like, what are my thoughts on happiness? Do I agree with this framework? And if I do, what does this framework look like for me?
Yes.
Because it will not be the same. The things I feel pleasurable, you won't feel pleasure in doing at all. The things I find meaningful, and so on. So it is hyper subjective how you will use this framework, but I still think it is somewhat universal, and that it is hopefully useful for some people. And otherwise, there are loads of other ones. We discussed lots of different conceptions of happiness today, so pick and choose, find the one you like the best. But I'm very happy if you think it's rooted in the things, the history, because I read so many books trying to figure out the history of happiness and to kind of combine it in a framework that made sense.
I said that I was gonna straw man your position, right? and actually thinking about it, that's not a wrong way to put it, because I do think it is sort of a straw man position to put up. But I failed logic, so I can't really extrapolate. It's this idea that asking how to be happy entails that you're not really happy, and in that sense, it shows that it's the wrong question to ask in the first place. I think that there's a lot of questions you can ask where the questions imply like a wrong attitude, but which is one of your three dimensions, right?
Yeah.
It's the attitude part, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people trying to search for happiness they're coming from a place of lack, from a place of not feeling enough happiness, or feeling,
which makes
or
sense.
maybe you could call it not enough meaning for some people, or for other people just being in pain, you know.
Yeah.
Seeking it in some ways, or at least if you're someone who's looking up this podcast because you typed in how to be happy or something, I don't know what we're gonna call the podcast yet, this episode, but something along those lines, and perhaps if you found it through that, it implies like a wrong attitude in some ways. Yeah,
you could say that. So it's a common thing that we talk about this, like criticism that, well, happiness, you should not search for it, then you'll never find it. I've seen this very often. A lot of like highly qualified and very well thought out articles kind of about this. And I must admit that some of it is just that I cannot relate, because it always starts with this, you know how it is. When you start looking for it, you'll never be happy. And I just haven't found that to be true at all. So now we're starting with some very anecdotal kind of non-philosophical thing. But they are, to be fair, usually they are also starting with saying, well, when you look for it, then you will be so frustrated that you will never find it. Mm-hmm. I have found in my life that the more I have emphasized happiness as a goal of mine, the more I have prioritized it, the happier I have become. It's been very simple. It sounds kind of stupid almost to put it like that. But I have not found at all that looking for it kind of diminishes my chances of getting it.
I like that reply. I think that's right, actually.
Yeah, and I get that you can be so frustrated just looking for it. Like, that's kind of the implication, right? Mm-hmm. Or that what you said a little bit more well put is that, well, if you're going to try and find something, it means you already don't have it, which also goes, that thought is all the way back to Plato and I forgot which one of the texts, but I'm not sure I completely agree with it, because I think, as I said earlier, it's always a spectrum. You don't have like a lack of pleasure and kind of, you have pain kind of. I think people are not just happy or not happy. They're not unhappy or happy. They are somewhat happy or somewhat unhappy, and it's a mixture of sorts. So how far along of the spectrum do you need to be before you are kind of unhappy enough that you shouldn't look for it? Or is it that kind of, you always should never look for anything you want, which to me sounds a little bit superstitious. I think what they're describing here, often a lot of critics, is they're looking for one of the dimensions. But if we can probably all agree that if you're looking for pleasure and to diminish pain, you're usually finding it. It's like it's not that hard. Like that, most of us can do that, especially if we're privileged enough to kind of live where we do and have a sort of nice life, with all the lovely kind of privileges that entails. Then if I want the beer, I'll go get the beer. It's pretty simple. If I am annoyed because I don't have enough things to do, I can go entertain myself, things like that. While fulfillment, I also think is kind of a go-getter situation. You want something, you decide it's important, you go get it. As you're trying to achieve it, it's meaningful. Like while you're writing your book, you're happy to be writing your book. You're much happier than if you hadn't started. And you're very happy when you've done it as well. I think what they're discussing is the third dimension. And they're saying if you're looking constantly for this kind of acceptance and this permanent happiness, it's a very elusive concept that I've seen many places. People describing happiness very much like heaven again. Happiness is this place where you need nothing and you have everything you need. Again, very Stoic and Epicurean. You have everything you need, and it's kind of this restful happiness. You're not going anywhere. That can be hard to achieve, I guess, because I don't really believe that can be so. You will always need fulfillment. You will always need to keep moving. People tend to describe happiness as either or. Either it's this perfect state, like heavenly state of nirvana and all these things you can call it, or it's this constant like hamster wheel of trying to find new things. And they argue both of them are kind of unfinished conceptions. I think happiness entails both. And I think that's lovely because you get lots of happiness from trying to find something. And I think the more you kind of are fulfilled, I don't know, maybe it's just a personal kind of observation as well. Maybe I'm deeply biased by that. I have a feeling that a lot of happiness thinkers seem to be very unhappy. I don't think I'm one of them. I think I have been very happy, and I think the last few years I've only been happier. It's very like odd personal thing to put out there as like a expert thing. No, but like
ranking all the other experts.
Yes, I'm the best. Yes. I'm the best at happiness. Yeah, exactly, like this advertisement. But I do think it's important because, like, why would you listen to someone? Why would you take advice from anyone who is not doing what you want to do?
Yes.
And I have been very happy, and I've realized that I've, as I said, based a lot on fulfillment. So I've done a lot to be fulfilled. And in some ways, I'm so fulfilled, kind of, that part of me, I sometimes have to kind of impulsive thought, like I could die tomorrow, I'll be fine. It'll be all right. I have a full list of other things I want to do, but like I've done so many of them that I feel like, what could I expect more than that? Like I'm very pleased with how everything has turned out. And it's not like I've not won in the lottery or bought a supercar or anything, but like I have done projects that were important to me with people that matter to me. I've not saved the planet. I would like to maybe help out a bit more in society, whenever you are quite young, and I've just finished my education. I have not had time to kind of contribute that much yet. But the things that mattered to me, practicing some art has mattered greatly to me, trying out different things, exploring, traveling, and exploring like friendships and places and all these things. That has mattered a lot to me. And I feel very fulfilled in those. There's lots of other things I want to do, but pursuing it has not lessened it in any way. So in a way, I do think you get to a point where you're like, yeah, that's been nice. Fulfillment is very much about this. What at my deathbed am I thinking like, what am I thinking about that I've done? What am I grateful that I've already done? So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? Kind of. I think I went on at least 28 tangents there. But
But yeah, that was really good, really good. Before we have to wrap up, I want to get more into your philosophy, and because I want to really be able to internalize this triangle, right? And so yeah, is it? Are we talking like? I want to know the factors, right? And so are we talking a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional triangle? And what does the 3 elements, like, how do they translate? Like, if you, I can imagine, like, if you have 0 meaning in your life, perhaps more pleasure, which you already got, is not really going to cut it. So it's sort of like it's like what do you call it, gange, when you
Oh, yes. You multiply kind of.
You multiply by 0 if you have.
Yeah, that's interesting.
0, right? In some ways, if you don't have any meaning
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, I think I get what you're.
So I don't know if you can internalize it like that.
I can try and describe it. My brain works in very like these. This is like very specific and kind of like the 3-dimensionality of it. It's very specific, but I kind of I would imagine like making a 2D triangle on the ground, and then each of the sides is one of the dimensions, and then you kind of just build them up, like you would be building this triangle like it would be in a 3D printer or something. You slowly adding bricks up all the way, and it's kind of easier for the triangle for the pyramid, I would say, to hold if the other sides are there to kind of support it. So the further you go up, you can't really reach the top with one of the walls being down. It will topple over. That could be one way of thinking of it. Okay. So if you're not happy at all, like you're unhappy.
Which one is in the middle and which ones are to the sides?
Well, I think they're just all equally important. So it's just they can turn around any way you want it. It gets very specific, this metaphor now. But I just think of it, so this 3-dimensional kind of pyramid shape. And anything like kind of, then maybe you could imagine if you wanted to, like a pyramid on the other side of the, like underneath the ground, like the basement of it, where you get unhappy, progressively more unhappy, and that could be a way to interpret
like
that.
Double triangle.
Yeah, that could be a way, but the most important part is the happiness part, right?
That's a square then.
Yeah, it's like a mirrored pyramid, and I think as I said, in the top of it, you have the highest part of every one of them. So they're all a spectrum going from the simplest of pleasures, the simplest of fulfillment, to the highest one. And if you kind of see that from above, like a top-down view, you also notice that they're getting closer as they're all kind of nearing the middle. So if you imagine seeing the pyramid from above, you're seeing how every dimension is kind of nearing the middle, right? It's like all going in. And that's on purpose. Very high pleasure feels a lot like fulfillment. Very high gratitude feels a lot like pleasure, and so on. So that's kind of the mental model you should have going. And your pyramid is not going to be very stable if they don't kind of match. But again, it's impossible almost, I think, to have 2 of them in its highest possible expression and then just one of them all the way down in the basement. Like, imagine your life was just going brilliantly and you were doing everything you wanted to do. You'd done every imaginable thing that was important to you. You had saved the planet from hunger and war, like most fulfilling like possible thing. And you were just in deep pleasure and no pain all the time. And like these really high pleasures. Can you imagine then also feeling like you cannot accept your life at all? It's really deeply unacceptable to you. It's kind of hard to imagine that much of an extreme there. So though I say try and keep all of them up, they do tend to follow each other a little bit. So half the work is done for you already. But we can imagine like slight deviations, right? A person who is maybe very perfectionistic, now I'm going to call myself out, like very like overachiever kind of type who just want to do stuff, right? And help others and might feel a lot of fulfillment, but might have not enough breaks in their life and therefore not feel so much pleasure and feel some pain from stress and worry. Because well-being is very important. That's why I do not want to get rid of the pleasure component. It's very basic, but it's very important. We have to feel pleasure. And at the same time, if we go in the other direction, if you're feeling lots and lots of pain every single day, of course you're not going to feel like your life is acceptable. and you therefore cannot be happy because you're feeling simultaneous pain and kind of, what would you say the opposite of accept? Like, it's unacceptable, your way of living to you. And often that also gives you like bad self-esteem, and it absolutely does not feel fulfilling because you're not doing any of the things you want to do. So while there can be differences in between them, and you should kind of, in my mind, like you would kind of pay attention to those, they do tend to follow each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you said also about unacceptable. Right?
Yeah.
And also, the fact that some people live unacceptable lives.
Yeah, so that's the political aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Because some modern Stoic thought get kind of irresponsible once in a while. I'm just calling out the Stoics, but it's this kind of like very modern take on Stoicism where, don't help anyone because like they just need to accept their situation. Like, no, if you're in deep poverty, sure, it might help you to be able to accept it, but we cannot expect people to. People who are in lots and lots of distress, mentally, physically, or are not able to gain fulfillment, are not able to do meaningful things with their life. Let's say they're imprisoned or they're so poverty-stricken that they don't actually have freedom. This is where freedom comes in, is in the fulfillment. You need freedom to feel fulfillment. You need freedom to do meaningful things that are meaningful to you. That is mental freedom and actual like physical freedom to do it. If you can't pursue what matters to you, you're not going to feel fulfillment, and that is also unacceptable. So this framework can actually be used as well to figure out political action. Like this group of people, what do we do to help them? And that's why I say happiness for everyone is important. So what is the problem with this group of people, like imaginary group of people? Are they feeling lots of pain? Like, are they all ill? Or are they not? Do they not have any kind of pleasure available? Do they not have enough food, for example, to actually feed them? Are they then feeling pain from hunger? Or don't they have freedom maybe to kind of do what matters to them? Because we cannot, like the attitude part is a little bit on that person. You cannot really force someone to accept their life. Some lives, as we said, are unacceptable. So when we're helping other people, we are mostly helping them find pleasure and refuge from pain and find fulfillment, or at least the freedom to do what they want to do with their life.
Can I have a practical question?
Absolutely.
Do you have a name of this happiness triangle?
I just call it the three-dimensional approach.
Okay.
Yeah, because it has three dimension. It's like I want people to think of the actual like prism or pyramid.
What's your last name?
Navi.
Helena Nerver and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
three-dimensional approach.
Yeah,
Okay.
at some point there might be an actual book on this.
I'm sure there will.
but you asked me to come here very early before I had so much time to. But yeah, I actually do think this might be worth examining a little further, and I would like to do that.
Yeah, I think this last idea with people living unacceptable lives, it's beautiful, and
Yeah.
to view it from that perspective of happiness.
Yeah, because that's the problem, right? It's the unhappiness, but it's not as in, they just need to lighten up. Like that's not just accept your position. Like no,
just be stoic.
Yeah.
bro.
And that's where Stoicism can be kind of toxic.
Yeah.
Just like Utilitarianism can also be a little bit like, yeah.
and your approach combines all of these, and that's
Yeah.
really cool. And yeah, hopefully we'll inspire some people, or maybe we ourselves will be inspired to help people who live unacceptable lives. That would be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there's one last idea I want to hit on.
Yes.
Before we.
Of
end
course.
this. So it's this idea that when you're in a rut, and I can speak from personal experience, but you can sort of extrapolate that to basically all people. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Some people feel the same way, that you are in a rut and you just can't see the light.
Yeah.
And yeah, perhaps, as I said, searching for how to be happy and listening to stuff like this implies a certain attitude that perhaps you are in that place. And I know from personal experience and from listening to these sort of podcast, YouTube happiness stuff while I am in a rut, and they don't help.
Yeah.
Nothing, no words, nothing really does it. And I can listen to all these self-improvement, do this, think that. It just doesn't get through, right?
Yeah.
Do you have anything for that?
Any advice on that? I think it's important to note that before you get into the philosophy and the concept of happiness, you need to make sure that you're doing well. Are you in a place where you can actually do that? Or are you experiencing any kind of psychological distress? There are lots of different disorders and just general mental problems, kind of. I don't want to use this slightly stigmatizing word potentially, but we all go through that, right? So if you are very stressed out, for example, as I was during Christmas, I was feeling lots of fulfillment, but I had a very stressful job for a while. And then I felt, okay, I'm burned out, and I just actual burnout in this kind of, I don't see any reason kind of for doing this. I don't want to get up. I don't want to do anything. You have to first heal that. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing you do. You want to make sure that you are actually feeling well, so that you're able to take these things in and then work on them. So that's really all the basic stuff. Are you sleeping enough? Can you reach out to someone kind of who can help you put up a system for getting out of bed? And so this is not something you just present to someone, for example, someone with a depression, and you're like, hey, here's how to be happy. Again, this is not a step-by-step on how to be happy. This is me trying to describe what is happiness even. So while this can be useful for you when you want to figure out, am I happy, am I not happy? And it does give some pointers to where you can start looking for it. I really do want to underscore that happiness is not, to me, something that you kind of pursue constantly. Some of it is something that happens right now. So your attitude, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So it gets much more complicated. We would need a full other hour, I think, to talk just about how do you then achieve it? Because a lot of people want the fix, kind of, right? Because they are in distress, and they should not have to be in distress. But it will look very different for everyone. So that's the kind of unsatisfactory answer, is to make sure you're in a place where you can actually pursue happiness. That is the freedom aspect needed. It's also an emotional freedom, a psychological freedom. Am I somewhere where I can actually successfully feel pleasure? If you're very depressed, a very common symptom is just the inability to feel any kind of pleasure. Then that part of that dimension will just never be fulfilled. And you're also very likely to not be able to get out of bed. If you're not getting out of bed, it's very hard to fulfill any kind of meaningful desires. And it's very difficult to feel acceptance and gratitude when you're depressed, for example. So even if you're not depressed per se, if there's something else going on, anxiety, just as the Stoics and the Epicureans discussed, will make you unhappy, like mental anguish. And you need to kind of be able to let go of those and accept some things. As I said, I've taken something from all these traditions because they have so much value, all of them. Mm-hmm. So start by checking that you're actually doing well. Are you up somewhere where you can actually begin this search for meaning? And
in relation to that, if I had to also provide a little answer for my own question, I think, if you are in this space, right, it helps to think that, well, you obviously have been happy before, and if you look through your memories, you would see that it's been going in a wave all this time, and now you're maybe at the crescent, and it can be hard when you are there at the bottom to see that it's going to go up again, but I don't know, maybe the brain chemistry also works in waves, and or life is like that, and trusting that it's going to be uprising again is it helps, I think, and then you're going to be in a position to be able to listen and think these things through.
Exactly. It needs to be a time where you're comfortable with it, but you can start by if you are in a position where you are feeling very unhappy, and then you can use this framework, the understanding of happiness here, to say, okay, where am I suffering the most? And maybe can I alleviate that? Is it pain? Is it unfulfillment? Or is my life unacceptable? That's another place to start. But again, important to stress that it's not a how-to guide, but a framework, like an understanding framework. So even just understanding what it is that you're looking for might help clear some misunderstandings so you don't go away too often.
Maybe it's a different episode, right? Like how to use the framework, your three-dimensional approach. Yeah, like when you're at bottom of the sea, or when you're looking at things from a different perspective, and then we can use that.
Yeah, I think there will be potentially many different ways to utilize this. Like there are many different. I think different thinkers would have different ideas of how to get there. But I think it's a meaningful endeavor to try and discover what even is there.
Yeah. I mean, I think why we're doing this, it's also for the internationals, and now because of the wave and AI and such, a lot of people will, or right now, experience burnout. Yeah. So, and depression, anxiety, also that will help. So it's a different topic, it's a different episode.
And that's kind of, again, that's psychological well-being a little bit, which is absolutely super important and very related. But I'm talking about like more like the philosophical idea of happiness.
It's
which I
just
also
an
think
idea for the future.
No, you're completely right. And I wanted to say one more thing, which is that it's pretty contested, even this idea that happiness is a destination. In most concepts of eudaimonia, it is not a destination, it's a way of living. So using this concept of happiness, it's not a destination either. Parts of it is, in a way. I tried to touch on it earlier, that pleasure is something that you either have or not, or don't have in the moment. And then over time, kind of how much pleasure. Fulfillment is something that has like a timeliness to it, right? You want to do it, you do it, you've done it. Ideally. But attitude does not have that. It is not a destination. You cannot end up being in the moment. Like you're either in the moment or you're not. And that's a very different conception. So how you get there is in a way not a meaningful question for all of the dimensions. But that's a whole other topic that we can do for another day. It's just important to note that the idea of happiness as a destination is potentially also very Christian. This, we need to get to heaven. We work hard, we get happy. Work hard, play hard, all these different
Also, if you suffer really much, then it means that you will be really happy, right?
Exactly, which is also a development kind of the same idea that work is suffering, but then comes pleasure. And I'm not a big fan of that one, as you can maybe tell from the framework, because I have not found it to be useful for me personally, and I don't think I've actually been happy when I've been suffering a lot. I think that should go without saying in general, but there has been a lot of this. Yes.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to the Copenhagen Circle. This was Helena Nørby.
Helena Skov Nørby.
Helena Skov Nørby with her three-dimensional approach to happiness. And this is Mathias, and with me Noémi.
Yeah, hi.
And you've been listening to the Copenhagen Circle. Please like and subscribe and come to our meetup in the future. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope that you find the happiness that you're looking for.
Oh, that's nice.